Hi everyone, and welcome to today's online chess lesson. Today we're talking about pirates. We have had a bit of a thing for pirates here at Chess Kids the last few days, so I'm going to show you a game that was played by two pirates. And the story of this game is that there was these two pirates on a ship off the coast of New South Wales, and their ship got wrecked, their pirate ship got wrecked, and only two people from the entire crew survived, and they were washed ashore on a deserted island somewhere off the coast of New South Wales. And onto the island with them washed just two things. One was a chess set, and the other one was enough wood to make a very small raft, a raft that could only fit one person. So they decided what they would do to work out who got to jump on the raft and sail off, hopefully to safety, was play a game of chess for it. And this is the game of chess that they played. Now, the guy who ended up winning that game, his name was Old Man Bailey. Old Man Bailey made a pirate's oath, a promise that when he reached Sydney and was able to get a ship, he would come back and he would rescue Forgotten Joe and bring Joe back to safety as well. So he wasn't going to leave him alone on the island forever. And Old Man Bailey, after he won the game, jumped on his raft, sailed off, and ended up in Sydney. And when he got to Sydney, he was so excited at being saved and finally being back in civilization, he sort of forgot about Joe for a while. And so he was partying and celebrating and having a good old time for weeks and weeks and weeks. And then eventually he was like, oh, I knew I'd forgotten something. I've forgotten my friend, Forgotten Joe, on the island. So he got a ship, sailed out, found the island, but alas, Forgotten Joe was no more. He was just a skeleton. And in the grip of the skeleton's right hand was a pawn. And this has become known as the cursed pawn. It's the curse of the white pawn, because Forgotten Joe played this game and it was all because of one pawn that he lost the game, and then he spent the rest of his life until he died on that island all alone, cursing this pawn, because if he hadn't taken that pawn, maybe he would have won the game and he'd have been on the raft and off to safety. And that curse did work because Old Man Bailey had broken his promise. And if you break a promise, if you don't live up to your pirate's oath, then all sorts of bad things can happen. So let's have a look at this game and we'll see what you guys think about the game. So we started off, Old Man Bailey's white, and he started with his first move, pawn to e4. Now these pirates are pretty good chess players actually, because they got a lot of time out in the high seas, dancing around, not doing too much. So they're pretty good chess players, but obviously they're not grandmasters. They're not out there playing chess in competitions and things like that. Usually, rather than playing a competition and try and win the trophy, they just go in and steal the trophies. So let's see what happened. Oh, Forgotten Joe plays pawn to e5. Good moves, controlling the center of the board here. We know that the center of the board is the most important area, and obviously these guys know that as well. So they're controlling the center of the board. Bishop comes out to c4, and he starts an attack on the weak spot. I guess the theory is you want to get off this island as quick as you can so you don't starve to death and turn into a skeleton. You want to be going for maybe a four-move checkmate. You don't know how good Joe is at chess, so he plays bishop c4 going for a four-move checkmate, and Forgotten Joe blocks it straight away. Okay, so the idea of the four-move checkmate is for the queen to come out into the attack. So let's get the queen out here, and then the queen would come from here in behind the knight and get a checkmate on the weak spot. Okay, so that would be then bishop protecting the queen, queen's on the weak spot, checkmate. But of course, when you play knight to f6, that stops the checkmate, because as soon as the queen comes off the back row into the attack, black could just take the queen. So it's a good way of stopping the four-move checkmate. It develops a piece. It threatens to attack this pawn here in the middle of the board as well. The knight's threatening the pawn. So it's a good all-round defensive move. And Old Man Bailey develops a piece. So they spend a couple of moves developing some pieces here. Old Man Bailey's got his knight and his bishop developed, so Joe gets his knight and his bishop developed. The pawn comes up to release this bishop into the attack. That's a good spot. Now the bishop can sort of zoom through somewhere out in that direction. And Black plays the same thing, developing a pawn. And now Old Man Bailey plays a very attacking move, a very aggressive move here. He plays pawn to f4. And so what we've got is we've got the two pawns next to each other here, which we call a pawn wall. So that's your strongest attacking formation here. So that's good to have your two pawns next to each other like that. But it is taking a risk. And I guess pirates are risk takers. They like to attack, so this is probably a good pirate move. He's got the wall of pawns there, attacking in the centre of the board. But can anybody tell me what has he opened up or weakened? So what's the risk that he's taking after he's moved that pawn to f4? Anyone got any ideas for me? Type it into your chat box if you know what's the bad thing about doing that move. Because we can see the good. Right? It's got the wall of pawns. We know that's the strongest attacking formation. So wall of pawns attacks all the squares in front of you. So that's a very powerful attacking formation. But there is something bad about that as well. So if anybody knows what that is, feel free to type that into your chat box and let me know what are the drawbacks of that move. All right, we've got a few people who are telling me the correct answer, all saying it different ways, but the main idea is that we are opening up the weak spot. Okay, so White's king is protected usually by pawns. When he moves this pawn away from the weak spot, that's the easiest place to break through. So Black's bishop's already hitting the weak spot there. All he has to do is somehow get his queen onto that square there, and there's a checkmate. Right? If only he could get his queen there somehow. Okay, then it would be a checkmate. Not that easy to do, but when you move the pawn away from it, that makes Black's job just a little bit easier to attack your king. The other thing it does, it's also opening up this diagonal. So if there was a chance to be attacked, White's king could get attacked on this right-hand side along this weak diagonal here as well. So good thing it's controlling the centre and attacking, but bad thing it's really opening up your king and you're taking a big risk there. So let's see what Black plays. He develops a knight. So obviously doesn't want to start an attack until he's got all his pieces developed. So 1, 2, 3 pieces off the back row for Black, 2 pieces off the back row for White. That seems to show that White needs another piece into the attack. White plays pawn to f5 here. Now what this move does, you'll see, pawn, 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 pawn. A nice long pawn chain. All right. Now, a pawn chain is usually a defensive formation, but when you can get a really long one like this, what you can do is you sort of follow your pawn chain, and from where the pawn chain starts to where the pawn chain finishes, that's the direction you like to attack in. All right. So if you want to attack, just look at where your pawn chain is pointing, and we can see here that White's pawn chain is pointing to the right-hand side, to the king side of the board. And that's definitely the direction that White wants to attack in. So the pawn's pointing in the right-hand side, king should be attacking in that side. Black's pawn chain here, 1, 2, 3 pawns in a line, is pointing also to the right-hand side of the board, to the king side. Oops, arrow wasn't very straight there. The problem is that White's pawn chain is longer, so his attack's going to be faster and stronger and easier to get going. So you definitely want to attack where your pawn chain is pointing, but if you get the longer pawn chain than your opponent, if you're trying to attack both on the same side, White's attack's going to be a bit stronger coming through to the right-hand side of the board. So f5 setting up an attack towards the right-hand side. And I guess that Joe didn't really notice that. He or didn't know what it implied when you've got that long pawn chain, because he castled, and by castling, that sort of puts him straight in line with that attack. So now, if White continues with the attack on the king side, that's where Black's king is. So it would have been something for Black to think about or to consider, would be instead of castling, oops, take that back there, instead of castling, to develop the bishop, develop the queen, and then maybe try and castle on the queen side. Because castling on the queen side, White still is going to be trying to attack on the right-hand side of the board on the king side, but then black's king isn't going to be there. So that's probably what I would think would be a better move for Forgotten Joe. But he castles on the king side, and we're going to see if white can get a bit of an attack going now. First developing in that last piece, so 1, 2, 3 pieces into the attack for white, 3 pieces in the attack for black, so that's even on development. And black came up actually with an attacking move now. It's going to try and take advantage of the fact that this F7 or F2 square for white is weak. So he's going to try and find a way of attacking on that weak spot, ignoring or bypassing all of white's developed pieces and launching an attack on the weak square. So let's see if anybody knows what that attack on the weak square might be. Alright, it was pretty easy, wasn't it? So he plays knight to g4. Okay, so when the knight moves out to g4, the knight's now threatening to move in and land on the weak spot, and of course it's going to be protected by the bishop, and as well as being protected by the bishop, that knight is going to be from there threatening the queen and threatening the rook. So what we call it when two pieces are attacked at the same time? A fork. So black's threatening to next move, bring the knight in and do that nasty fork. The knight's going to come in onto f2, and then he's going to be going for the queen and the rook, and white's going to be in trouble. So what could white do to protect this weak spot and to sort of try and avoid his queen and his rook being forked? Any ideas what white should be able to do here to get out of that? All right, we've got a good suggestion here, which is to move the queen. Now that's what you do to block the four-move checkmate. You move your queen, because then if your opponent comes in on the four-move checkmate attempt, you can take them. That doesn't work in a fork situation because the bishop moves in onto the weak spot check anyway, and you're not going to take him with the queen because you don't want to lose your queen. Right? The knight here is protecting that bishop. So after the check, king moves out of the way, and then the bishop just retreats straight out of there, and next move the knight is going to move in onto the weak spot, and it's going to be check. Okay, from there he's going to be putting the king in check and threatening the rook at the same time. So using the queen from this position as a way of defending, okay, putting a queen in the way like that, doesn't really stop the knight or the bishop coming into the weak spot. So it doesn't work out that well for you. What other options do you have to try and stop the knight getting into the weak spot? Well, white figured he can't castle anyway, because if he tries to do castling, he's putting himself straight in line with the bishop. He's putting himself into check. So that's an illegal move. He's not allowed to do castling. So if he's not allowed to castle, he figures, well, if I just move my rook across here, can't castle anyway, the rook now covers the weak spot. Okay, so the rook's protecting the weak spot, and if the knight moves in, right, which is, or if the bishop moves in there to do a check, you would just sacrifice your rook for the knight, lose your rook, and then get the bishop. So we've ended up there with a knight and a bishop, which is 3 plus 3, 6 points, and you've only had to lose a rook, which is 5 points. So that would end up being a very good exchange. A knight and a bishop is much better than a rook, really. So if we go back here and we see what white's next move is, rook f1, what that does is that protects the weak spot, and black can't move his knight or his bishop in onto the weak spot now without having to lose a knight and a bishop for a rook. 6 points for 5. Forgotten Joe thought about things here, and he thought he won the game. And this is where he thought he could get a pawn for nothing. He plays knight, takes the cursed pawn. Right, so he takes this cursed pawn. He says, after the game he wishes he didn't take it, but at the time it looked like a really good munch. He gets a free pawn. Now, what moves could white do that's going to spoil black's plan? Okay, we've got a suggestion for later on as getting that bishop into the attack, which is going to be a good idea. Try and hit the queen. But let's work out. The knight's just taken that pawn. What can white do? Well, the obvious suggestion that a couple of people have made is you just take it. Yeah, but Black had that planned out. All right, Joe's not that silly. He can see that if he takes the pawn, he's going to get taken back, and he's actually got a plan for that. So what would happen if? What was Joe's plan? Right, he wanted to lose his knight, so he took a pawn and he lost a knight. Right? But what he's going to try and do is he's going to try and win that knight again. So even though he's lost a knight, he's going to be able to win a knight, and then he's going to, at the end of that, be a pawn ahead. Okay, because he's managed to take that pawn. So what move could he play now that wins White's knight that's sitting on h2? Any ideas? It's taking advantage of the fact that the king's open, that we saw before this weak diagonal along here when the pawn moved away from the weak spot. So after knight takes h2, if White takes him back, Black can take advantage of that open space around the king and play queen out to h4 check. Now, let's have a look at that. Check is also threatening a second thing. After the White gets out of check, the knight's gone. Okay, so let's say the king moves out of the way, queen takes the knight, and then Black's going to be a pawn ahead for nothing. Plus, this pawn's going to start, let's get rid of these ones, from here, Black's queen's going to start coming in and taking out this pawn, and then White's going to be in all sorts of trouble. Right, the queen's got in behind that pawn chain. Okay, we've got a nice safe pawn chain, which is good defense. But once the queen's in behind it, well, there's all sorts of trouble for White here. So this is looking pretty good for Joe. Sadly, it didn't work out quite like he planned, and he cursed the fact that he took that pawn, and that pawn, the H pawn, has ended up being known as the cursed pawn. So be very careful whether you move that pawn forwards or take that pawn from your opponent. That's the cursed pawn, the one in front of the rook, and it can be on either the left or the right-hand side. The pawn in front of the rook is the cursed pawn. White played here an attacking move. He just basically ignored the knight. He's like, well, I don't care if you take my cursed pawn, I'm just going to move into the attack. And he plays knight up to g5, which just leaves his rook in danger. Right? So the knight can just come and take his rook. So Joe's like, sweet dude, another piece for nothing. So now he's taken a rook and a pawn, a total of 6 points ahead. So you would think winning the game, right, or at least ahead on pieces, gives you a better chance of winning. But White's got a few really good pieces that can all come into the attack and start attacking Black's king here. Right? Black has only got pawns in front of his king, so what moves could White do to start this attack rolling and try and break through that defensive pawn barrier in front of the king? Good suggestion, yet using the queen, getting the queen into the attack. So he plays queen to h5. Now, queen comes in the attack, the queen's now threatening next move, queen takes pawn. Right? If queen takes the pawn, that's going to be checkmate, right? Because the queen's going to be backed up by the knight. Oops, daisies. Queen's going to be backed up by the knight. King can't move to the side because the queen covers it. Can't move anywhere else because all of his own pieces are in the way. So it's a problem for Black. It's checkmate next move. Okay. So White was just able to ignore this knight. Right? He's like, who cares? That knight's there. I can take that any time. I'm going for a checkmate. I'm going for a checkmate instead. So he's threatening the checkmate. What can Black do to stop it? Because not that easy. Not that easy to stop the checkmate here. All right, we've got a couple of suggestions. We probably don't want to use the queen to take the knight, because if the queen takes the knight, bishop just takes the queen. You've lost a queen really for nothing. So you're ending up a queen behind. Another suggestion that was made was to move the rook across. You can move the rook across and then try and get your king. Try and get your king escaping out this way. So see if your king can sort of escape out that direction. So let's have a look at that. If rook goes there, I think you're probably still going to get checkmated pretty quickly here. The queen can come in, take out that pawn check, force the king into the corner, and then bring your queen back here and still do a checkmate next move on that weak spot. So it sort of doesn't really stop it for very long, because we just chase the king into the corner and then go for the checkmate. And black's king now can't come out this direction because white's got his bishop stopping that square. All right, any other suggestions from back in this situation here? Good. The only suggestion from Joy's group there. Well done, guys. The only move that black could think of was to do pawn to h6. You guys are going well with that. Good defensive move. Stops the queen from coming through, and also threatens to take the knight at the same time. So it seems like a pretty good move. All right. Old Man Bailey played knight takes pawn now, and there's a few threats here. Okay. First of all, he's threatening the obvious, take the queen. Okay, so black's queen's in trouble. So that's the obvious thing. Now, if he saves his queen, you've got to be very careful. If you save your queen by moving across one step, or actually same thing happens if you move the queen forwards one step, you still lose your queen. White can do a really clever double check. See, this bishop here is almost attacking the king. Right? It would be check if only that knight was out of the way. So we can do here what we call a discovered check, where the knight moves, and the knight can move anywhere it wants. It's got invincibility. It's like eating a mushroom in Mario Brothers. You move your knight out of the way, take that pawn, and you can't get taken because the bishop is now all of a sudden discovered a check. Oh, hey, look, I moved the knight. The bishop's now attacking the king. There's a check with the bishop. Now, once the king gets out of check, just get to take the queen for nothing. Right? And that happens the same way if the queen moves across this way. Knight can move out of the way. Discovered check with the bishop attacking the king. Then when the king moves out of the way, next move, got the queen for nothing. So it's trouble if the queen tries to move out of the way to one of those two squares, your queen's going to get taken. What if you move your queen to e7? Saves the queen, and now the knight can't really go anywhere. That's going to take the queen. But white's got another move which is even more powerful than that discovered check, which is a double discovered check. So here you can play knight takes pawn and put the king in check with the knight, and at the same time discovered check with the bishop. So we've got two pieces attacking the king at the same time. A double check is the most powerful move you can possibly do, because when you get your opponent into a double check, there's only one thing that your opponent can do, and that is to move his king out of the way. Okay, can't do anything else when there's a double check. Right, so after the double check, king could just move out of the way, right? But the only place he can move to, the knight was covering. Actually, he could move to h7 as well, but the same thing happens whether he moves to h8 or to h7. The next move, very good for those people who've seen this already. The knight just moves out of the way, and now that's checkmate, because the bishop here on c4 still covers the escape that way, and all of these squares are covered by white's queen. So white's queen's got the check. The pawn covers this square, so black's going to be in checkmate. Alright, so let's go back. So black saw all that and is like, oh, so you can't save my queen anywhere. Anywhere that he moves the queen, it's either going to be checkmate or it's going to lose his queen. So the sensible move to do would be to sacrifice the rook and take the knight, which is what he does in the game. He sacrifices the rook, and that's not too bad. He's giving away 5 points for 3, and now he's got his king into a sort of a safer position. He's hiding behind his pawns. His king's in a pretty safe position. Old Man Bailey comes up here with a killer move, literally a killer move, because Forgotten Joe died when he was stranded on the island. So this is the move that is really, literally a killer move for white here. It's a tough one to see. It's a very tricky move. I'll give you guys a few seconds to have a think about it and see what would you do if you were white here to win your freedom and escape from the deserted island and leave poor old Joe sitting there clutching the pawn that he took, saying, oh, I curse you, pawn. I wish I hadn't taken you. So we're getting some suggestions, and we've got we've got some good ideas. So Queen G6, for example, is a pretty good idea. Putting your opponent in check. Let's see what happens when Queen goes check, King moves out of the way. How are we going to finish him off with a checkmate? We can't quite get a checkmate there. Not in one move anyway. So let's have another look for some other moves that might be possible. So the way that I would think about this, I would think, well, the bishop's in a good spot, the queen's in a good spot. These are very good attacking pieces. This pawn is doing a good job because it's covering that square G6. The bishop and the queen cover G8. All we have to do is put the king in check and cover H8 square. So what you'd like to do is black's queen to be out of the way, and then you move your queen down to the back row. That'll be checkmate. Queen's attacking the king, check. Can't take you because it's backed up by the bishop. Can't move out this way because the pawn can't move anywhere at all. So that would be what you would like to do. Queen G8, checkmate. All right. You can't do it now because of the queen. So does that give you any clues? If you could get rid of the queen, all right, if you can get rid of black's queen, you're going to be able to do that Queen G8 checkmate next move. Okay, it's a very tricky move. We've got some people suggesting very close to the right move, so I'm going to show you the move that Old Man Bailey played. He played Bishop G5. Now, Bishop goes to G5 is an excellent move. It's pretty amazing. The bishop is now threatening the queen, and if the queen takes the bishop, queen goes down to the back row, checkmate. All right. Bishop protects the queen, pawn covers the escape, and queen's covering those squares. So that's going to be checkmate. If the queen doesn't take the bishop, well, I guess he could do pawn takes, couldn't he? His pawn could take the bishop. If his pawn takes the bishop, it's still checkmate. Queen now goes to H5, and because this bishop, let's get rid of that, is covering the G8 square, the queen covers the whole H file, black's in checkmate again. So you can't take it with the queen because it's going to be checkmate by going Queen G8. You can't take it with the pawn because it's going to be checkmate by going queen here. So he's can't take that bishop. If he doesn't take the bishop, he's got to watch out. The next move, his queen doesn't get taken, and he's got to make sure he doesn't move his queen forwards because we saw the checkmate that we were aiming for before. So Forgotten Joe didn't have much choice. He had to move his queen somewhere. Not here because it gets taken, not here because it gets taken, not here because it gets taken. He moves it all the way across to H8. And the only place he could go that was safe. Now what move did Old Man Bailey do here to get his checkmate, to win this game and finish him off? Any ideas? Good for those people who've got it. 2, 3 people with the correct move. There's another one, 4 with correct moves. The next move that white can play, that he did to finish the game off, Queen G6 checkmate. All right. The bishop on C4 covering all those squares, stopping the king from moving down to G8. The queen's protected by the pawn, and we've got a lovely checkmate. All right. Great checkmate. Good little story. Be careful in your games of the cursed pawn. That H pawn, okay, so at the start of the game, one of those 2 pawns, the rook's pawn in front of the rook, is cursed. Don't move it forwards. Don't bother taking your opponent's cursed pawn either. Leave them with it. So cursed pawns, watch out for those ones. Good luck in your games today, and we'll see you next week.